Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, welcome back. In our last Part 5 session, we focused on making navigation easier and access to requirements more efficient. We also focused on naming conventions for our requirements to make managing them more productive. In this session, we'll pick up where we left off in Part 5 and start with connections to tell your stories through the proper associations. Another view of connections is relevance, in particular, data relevance. For example, we're drawing relevance between elements, including requirements or scope. Objects may be in their own packages or namespaces, and packages may be relevant or connected to other packages, just as elements may be relevant to other elements. In model-driven delivery, model-driven anything, we can draw both horizontal as well as vertical relevance in what we're modeling. This helps us move from technical or binary forms of communication to human forms. For example, in our access activity and use case that we built in the previous sessions, we have login, which is owned by access and transitions from some starting event. Later transitions to validation if conditions are met. We show the login implements requirements, explaining what is happening. This approach helps humans understand the system or what the system is doing. The non-technical clients understand better. The solution architect can address who's doing the what, and the engineers assigned through solutioning can address how the what will be done. Next, we'll talk about namespaces, which are the folders or packages in your browser. In software development, just as in this model development, namespaces are used to organize and categorize code or model elements, making it easier to manage and maintain complex software systems. They're the fundamental concept in various programming languages as well as modeling languages, and specific implementations and technology may vary from language to another. In this case, unified modeling language. We can provide instructions to each stakeholder to help guide the delivery experience across various processes and practices. We will probably wrap up here, and in our next session, which is going to be Part 7, we'll start to get into controlling what stakeholders will do, team coordination, stakeholders preparing or performing tasks at the same time, and locking diagrams and elements. And finally, in Part 8, we will do some reporting and introduce model library, which can be exposed across disparate Sparx project instances. Okay, let's get started. The next part is going to be on connections, associations, and lines. Remember to do your connectors before you just don't start dragging and dropping a bunch of requirements, because you want to make sure you're connected to the right requirement. Because when you go to traceability and I select this one right here, it's this requirement 004 is realized by this exception, this decision. If I select this decision, this exception or decision implements this requirement. So you're telling your story using connectivity, the connections, the associations, and using whatever the association type, we're using realization here. All right. So very quickly can do it this way. I can bring in all my requirements and I can start filling these things out, moving forward much faster. I'm ensuring that I'm missing less requirements. It's not going to be 100%. Because that's the reason why you're doing analysis, that's why you're doing validation, that's why you're doing testing, that's why you're running through and you're doing your simulations, because you want to make sure you didn't miss any requirement. Now this method, as we're creating these elements, these requirement elements, they're dropped inside the diagram area. So in this particular case, it's under this diagram for tailoring that we created. Actually, that was the other one that we did earlier. Here we go, for ordering, right? So we brought in 8 requirements, elements here. They're not populated, they're empty, but they are here as we're building this out. When you're done at any particular point and I would wait as close to the end as possible. You can then drag and drop these to the requirements management folder that they're going to go into. So what I did just then is I dropped them under requirements management, and these are under order processing. So I can select the first one, hold down the shift key, select the last one, drag and drop it under order processing. So now under order processing, I have these requirements that we've created, and I can drag and drop these into this workspace here, select for all, select it, and it will bring in all 8, and we're going to have a lot more than 8 as we're going through here, and set them in there for you. Now these are linked. Let me left justify, go down a little bit here. And then of course I'm going to be sizing these and so on as they're going through so they fit in this diagram space so that, we see something that's cleaner like this when we're done. But that's just another tip for you, because if you go in like on requirement 2, what I'm going to do is just double click it and just type something in here like this name. So now I've written to the database, I posted to the database, and if I go back over here, that requirement 2 is being populated and exposed in this, and vice versa. So what I do typically though is I leave these where I'm working. So I will move these back down under this diagram. So if I go back here, find in the browser, and it's down here, I want the requirements under this element back to where they were. Let me get tailoring out of the way before I make a mistake. Let me bring all of these, hold shift, grab all of them, drag and drop them. They're under order processing. And so I'm just going to let go. And now they're all back here. Now, if I've got namespace turned on, let me go back up here. If I have namespace turned on, it'll show right here. So it says, hey, this requirement is from use cases. If it was in the same folder as this diagram, you wouldn't see the namespace, because I've got namespace turned on. Here I double click in here and I go to diagram, show namespaces, right? So I've got that turned on here. I do everything here first and then I move it up. Now, if I was continuing requirements, I came back and they left off on 08, and then all of these were moved up into the requirements management folder, I'd want to make sure that no one's changed my numbering convention, right? I come in a day later on in the afternoon, and I want to bring in more requirements. We left off on 008. Now, if I moved these requirements into that requirement space, let me take 2 again, drag it all the way up here and put it under order processing. You can see that 2 now shows it's no longer in this diagram space, right? And I should see the requirements around these activities and be able to determine where they left off, right? So I could go to settings, and then I go to auto names and appearance. I select this, I hit R for requirements, find it. The next number is 009. Now, one of the things you want to be careful of is if you come back and another modeler has changed the starting numbers, like they were working on, access failed, which is 2, you want to make sure that your prefix, your counter is correct. I don't think anybody's going to mess around with a suffix. There's a space in there. They may put a colon, but that's up to the team on what the convention is they want to use. But you want to always come back before you start using this auto numbering capability. Check your prefix and check your counter so that you're picking up when you come back at 009. All right. So anyways, the next thing I want to show you is that, see, when I came back to this diagram, the tooling is still on activity diagram. If I want it to always come back when I launch this by default, I want it to permanently launch in requirements mode and not activity mode, what I can do is I can go to design, go to options, change type, go to extended, go to requirements. Now I'm going to hit OK. And yes, I save. Now when I bring this up, watch when I close it, right? And then I bring this back up. Let me go all the way back down here again. It will come up in with the requirements toolbox. However, I can no longer right click in here and start simulation, right? So just remember that if I go to simulation, I can start simulation, but I don't get the pop-up menu feature for simulation. So, it's running through and it's interpreted. I like to keep it in the activity type diagram so that I'm able to get to running simulations as I'm doing my requirements analysis. So again, I go to design, I go to a diagram panel, I go to options, change type, behavioral, and I want it back as an activity diagram. So now I'm back as an activity diagram. Now when I right click on this, I get all of the activity or this diagram's tooling, most importantly, execute simulation. So now I can run simulation in here, and as it's running through the simulation, it's going to get to this decision point, and then it's going to ask me, hey, ship order, products not in stock, go through the flow. This helps me develop requirements. I'm going to go ahead and cancel and stop this, all right? And another thing is if I put a stop point in here, which I show you in another video, I can put stops at each one of these. I'm able to stop and say, all right, I want to do requirements analysis on fill order, the decision, and ship order. So I can put a stop here, and a stop here, right? So again, how you do that, if you remember from the video, you go to simulation, you select breakpoints from dynamic simulation, and you can see that I am going to remove these because I am not sure. So I'm going to delete both of them. Those are from a previous exercise that was there. I'm going to select fill order. There we go. The decision. There we go. And then the ship order. There we go. Now when I'm running my simulation manual, it will go through and it should stop. You see these green dots? It'll stop here and I'm able to do other things. I can stop here, cancel, step over, stop, and because I might want to test all the way up to this point, I can stop and then I can work on requirements, all right? Well, however many requirements there are for this single element. Here's an important configuration tip. So I'm logged in right now as a client, and the clients have less permissions than, of course, model administrators. So if the client is in here and is building requirements following the method where they're auto setting, it's disabled. They're not allowed to make changes to the auto numbering settings for doing requirements. So this is how you fix that. So this is what the security users work area looks like if you're allowed to get to this area. So your administrators in here who have group rights for administration, here is an example of a client. And you could apply this user group to any user that's here so that those settings are the same. So in this particular case, we have a client user group right here. And these are everything that this user group is allowed to do. Of course, they're not allowed to do security. They're not allowed to do, I don't allow them to edit scripts. We'll get into scripts later, and some other things. I don't allow them to configure images and other things. But everything that's checked, these are the things they're allowed to do, right or wrong. You're going to go ahead and set up your environments the way you want to. But down here where it says manage reference data, we want to select this, and then we want to save, all right? So now any group that you come around to that you want to give those permissions to, you can do that. So for testers, they're allowed to manage, but for clients, they were not. And that's why it was disabled. So I'm back over to the client login session. And if you fix this while the client was already logged in, they're going to have to close the project and then relaunch the project. Now they have rights to set the auto name counters in this project. Now this is optional. We put a memo note for our client stakeholders when they came in and they were adding their requirements to ensure that they set to the proper requirement naming convention, right? So we just put a note where we want them to be entering requirements for these areas. So the client or authorized user can now go into the area, go to Settings tab, Auto Name and Number, hit R for requirements to get down this long list, choose requirements, and you can see it's already set. They're told to set this to 4, so they'll set it to 4. They are just starting. There's no requirements yet in this, so they've been trained to start the counter at 1. Save and close, and now when they go over to the hamburger, if the requirements toolbox is not already chosen, they can come in and start adding business requirements or any other requirements that they would want to bring in, like user requirements and those kind of things. So, and the auto numbering and naming is set to the right area and the right starting points as far as numbers, so they can now start adding requirements. If the stakeholders are following this naming convention, in this case, REQ is requirement, 01 is the requirement space, the access area in this particular case, and you want to find the last requirement that was done, it's very simple. We're going to go up in the upper left in the ribbon. We're going to select search model. And in here, just use the simple search. You're going to be tempted to, look for things like requirements. Don't do that. Just use the simple search. And we're going to put in rec 01. This is the area we're looking for. And we're going to enter it. You can see here's the requirements that have been done. So you can always sort either way. So then what you'll do is you're going to go up to settings. You want to make sure, remember, I told you all this, the number, we're going to select rec. We're going to look for requirement. We can see the last person left on 04 area. We want to change that to 1. We said it was 19, and we want to change this to 20 to be the start. Make sure apply on creation is selected. Sometimes your stakeholders, your modeling peers, they'll uncheck that, and you want to make sure that is checked. Save and close. And then when we go back and we want to bring any particular requirement, if you're not on the requirement toolbar, you can go down here and find requirements and then bring in the requirement that you want. In this case, we're going to bring in a functional requirement. Drag and drop it. You can see it starts on the right number for you to continue with the requirements development. Okay, we're going to wrap up here in our next session, which is going to be part 7. We're going to get into performing tasks at the same time. You're going to have multiple modelers potentially working on the same elements, the same diagrams, doing similar efforts and things like that as you're delivering whatever you're delivering, your project, your effort, your sprint, whatever it is. So I look forward to seeing you there. And until then, happy modeling.